What's up, Wildside besties and baddies? I'm Bailey.
And I'm Chelsea, and we're here to walk you through the wild sides.
From homicides to hosticides and everything in between.
We're so glad you're here, so buckle up
and enjoy the ride.
Well, thank you so much for being on here again. Naturally, I just want to be like, man, I'm cold today and my back is out. But being that, let's see here, what are we sitting at here in Texas?
Well, you're in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you there's a 60-degree difference from where we're at.
I bet you we're sitting at a balmy 41 degrees.
Oh my God.
I bet you're like, I wish.
I wish. You know what? In all honesty, so in 32 days, I'm off to Playa del Carmen in Mexico. So I'm excited about that.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. If only it was minus 58 when I leave instead of plus 5, but
I know.
yeah.
When you start getting that cold, obviously, like, this is not relevant to what you do at all, but when it starts getting that cold, like, is there a difference between -12 and -40? Does that make sense? Like, is there really that much of a difference?
Like, it's so cold that you can't even, like, tell.
Minus 12 is like t-shirt weather. It's fantastic here. But minus 47 or minus 50, when you go outside, it honestly takes your breath away. Like you can't breathe outside. Vehicles, like it took me 5 days to get my truck started. I had to pull the battery out, get it inside, charge it. Like it just, even block heaters. Like I don't know if you're familiar with block heaters. So up here we have it's a cord that plugs into your oil pan and it heats the oil. And even at that temperature, it can't even keep up. So it's like driving a block of ice. It's brutal.
I mean, I guess growing up in South, like way South, like on the coast of Mississippi,
Yeah.
I guess we've had similar experiences, but like on the opposite end of the spectrum, where like it's so hot, you know, like your mind can't even wrap around like how hot and humid it is.
No.
That's so bizarre. So bizarre.
Well, Luke, I am really excited to have you here. So Chelsea and I have been talking about this for about a week. My husband, unfortunately, is on baby duty, so he's watching the 2-year-old. But he was like, can I please just sit in the corner and listen to this? Because he is kind of a fanboy for you and like what you guys do.
Same with my husband. He's like, I've been like watching this stuff. I didn't even know this was a thing, and I've been watching all this stuff. This is amazing.
It's funny that everyone says that, because really what we do is everyone thinks it's like, so I've been with the fire department for 20 years as well, volunteering. And so you get that adrenaline rush and that, and everyone thinks that diving is kind of the same type of thing. Like, oh, you jump in and you go and you do all this stuff. It is a slow, boring process. Everyone's like, can I come watch you dive? I'm like, yeah, but you're just going to see bubbles on the water. Like, that's all you're going to see. Like, you're not going to see anything. Like, it's so boring. But yeah, it's a really cool experience, especially for us up here.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's okay with you, Luke, because like Chelsea and I know all about you and your company, your team. But if you don't mind just taking a minute and sharing who you are, what you do to our listeners so they know exactly who you are today.
So I'm Luke Jevne, and I'm now the chief. I was the president for the last 4 or 5 years of the Underwater Search Team. That's our operating name. We have a really complicated legal name. It's called the Central Alberta Rescue Diving Society.
Okay.
And every time we get a phone call, the law enforcement is like, is this the Central Rescue? So we ended up changing our name to the Underwater Search Team. And so we're a registered nonprofit organization as a charity up here in Canada, in Alberta. And Alberta is the only province in Canada that doesn't have a funded dive team. Every other province across Canada has a funded, whether it's directly or indirectly through the governments, for underwater recoveries. Alberta does not.
Rude, Alberta.
Exactly. And we're such a rich province, and we try to do everything bigger and better and all that stuff. But unfortunately, we just don't have one. And so in 2012, late 2012, I'm kind of in central Alberta, just outside of my hometown. There was two boys that drowned,
Hmm.
and there was nobody to recover them. So 8 volunteer firefighters had their basic open water diving experience, and so they went and tried to find these two boys. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed, but they saw the need and they started this organization in 2013,
Wow.
and it has grown huge since then. And so we, again, Alberta not having a certified dive team, we cover 256,000 square miles. That's our territory.
How keep going, I'm sorry. My mind can't even wrap around that.
Yeah.
So we work closely with another dive team out of New Jersey. We've actually brought them up for training because you can't even get the training that we need up here in Canada. So we brought these New Jersey boys up to give us the training, and so you could fit 17,000 New Jerseys into Alberta, and it boggles their mind how much territory we look after. We can drive 10 hours to a call easily. From one end of the province to the other end of the province, you're probably looking at driving 23 hours.
Wow.
Holy cow. I mean, that's kind of how we feel living in Texas, right? Like from the panhandle down to the coast. I
100%.
don't know. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I mean, it's a good probably 14 hours or something like that,
Yeah.
but 23
Yeah.
hours, from one end to the next.
Yeah. And so Alberta has 600 lakes, 245 rivers. And so we look after all that. But then there's the sloughs and the dugouts and like all the man-made lakes throughout the cities and all that stuff. So there's a ton of water bodies that we do look out for. Unfortunately, because we travel so far, the reality is we don't do rescues. It's just not a possibility.
Right, right. There's no way.
No.
And how many people are part of your team when you say we?
So, as with every volunteer organization, we have 24, 25 people on our books, but there's about a core group of about 6 or 7 of us. Extremely hard to find certified people to do what we do because it's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. So you can't just be an open water diver and just jump into the water and think you're going to do something. There's a lot that goes into it. So trying to find the certified people is extremely difficult. And that's why we have to bring the Jersey boys up to train us.
So when you say it's not like, what did you call it? Open water diving?
Open water.
What is the difference with the lingo?
So open water is your basic scuba diving certificate. So if you want to go get certified for scuba diving, your first certificate is going to be in open water.
Okay.
So that's basically you do a couple days of pool training, classroom training, and then you're certified to go down to 30 feet in water. And it's very different from where I'm at versus the Caribbean. The Caribbean, you get to see everything. You're looking at fish.
Yeah.
Here in Alberta, it's murky water. We're going in blind. Everything is by feel. And so, and that you don't know what's under the water, and that's why it's so dangerous.
So what is it that you have? Like what certification, if you will, do you have as opposed to open water?
So our minimum standards is called a public safety diver. So that's basically in order to do body recoveries, you need to have your public safety diver, and that's basically what law enforcement looks for. So that's our starting point. And then now that we brought the Jersey boys up, now I'm an underwater criminal investigator, decontamination expert. I have, I don't know, 30 some certificates all related to public safety diving.
Wow.
It's very intense. It costs a lot of money. And yeah, it's been quite the go for the last few years.
And I think Chelsea, because I really want to get back to the certifications and what goes into that, what that looks like.
Yeah.
But talking about the expense, because you guys are a volunteer program, right?
Yeah.
And Chelsea, didn't you say that you were looking that up? And what did you find?
I'm probably going to say this number wrong, but I thought that on your site it was the upwards of like $800,000 to run your program for a year. Did I read that?
So yes, that's what we were asking originally. We were asking for 800,000 to $1 million annually to be able to continue, because right now all our training, all our all our equipment, it's all personally funded. And then you have your lost wages every time you go out to a call, and it's not just a 1 day call. You're gone for upwards of 7 weeks on some calls.
Mm.
So you like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I worked 3.5 weeks throughout the summer. So there's a lot of money that gets like, taken from your wallet to do this. It's a very expensive hobby,
Mm.
without a doubt. But yeah, so to go back to your number, the actual number for a fully funded operating dive team, let's say a law enforcement dive team, the RCMP, which is our federal police force up here, each province spends about $3.5 million annually to fund their dive teams. And
Wow.
so we're asking the government for 1.5 million for the first year, and then $1 million every year after that, just to be able to maintain.
And just while we're on the topic, how can people donate to your program if they're like, man, what you guys do is amazing? Is there like a link that we can list in our show notes that they can click on and they can be redirected to? How does that work?
Absolutely. So on our website, www.underwatersearchteam.com, there is actually a donate now portal that you can go through, and it's a secure PayPal account and all that stuff, and that'll come directly to our bank account. And like donations are very much appreciated, but it's unfortunately we're not going to get the $1.5 million in donations. We
Hmm.
need the federal or the provincial funding as well, but donations definitely do help us along.
Until we can get to the point to where the Canadian government essentially is saying, okay, then
Yeah,
we'll give you the funding that you need.
100%.
Right. Mm.
Now, is it, you said that Alberta was the only province, is that correct?
Yeah.
Um, Now, so is this an issue, and maybe this is way too deep of a question and maybe it's not relevant, but is this a Canadian government thing or is this an Alberta
This is an
issue?
Alberta, like this is so like we have provinces up here, not states. So this is a provincial issue. Every other province somehow funds their law enforcement. I don't know how or what, but we've been talking with the government for the last 2 years, and we've submitted our proposal for 4 times now, and we're just really trying to hammer it home that this is an unrecognized service. Like there's nobody else in the province that does what we do.
Well, if you need, I mean, we'll sign petitions, we'll do whatever we need to do. Because again, I think the work that y'all do is so incredible. So if you decide to do even if it's on like a legal pad, yellow piece of paper petition,
Sure.
Chelsea and I'll sign it. We'll be here for it. We'll ask our listeners to sign it. I mean, because it's just, and I think they'll be more motivated based off of like what we start to get into in this interview, right? Once they
Yeah,
start
yeah,
to really understand the ins and outs of what you do and the work that you do.
for sure. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, so Luke, I guess naturally that next question that we have is obviously you're diving, you're recovering underwater now. Are you looking for what? Are you looking for vehicles? Are you looking for bodies? Are you like there could be a body in a vehicle? What exactly prompts you to go look? Who calls? What is that process? Walk us through that process.
So we will only be deployed by law enforcement. That's kind of how we set up our team. We're not going out to look for your Apple iWatch or your diamond rings or anything like that. We're there just strictly for the lack of a term, an emergency service, which we don't have. So we will have 3 things that we will look for: vehicles being one, whether it's for suspicious reasons or insurance claims. We want to keep our waters clean and contaminant free from oils and gasolines and all that stuff. Evidence recovery is another one. And then the third one is body recovery. And so we need to be deployed by our law enforcement to go out. Like, unfortunately, Alien Chelsea, like, you can't call me and say, hey, somebody drowned. Can you come get me? Look, no, unfortunately, we need to be called by law enforcement, because until it's proven otherwise, we're treating everything as suspicious.
Okay. And so what I hear and what I'm interpreting is when law enforcement is involved, whether it be vehicle evidence or persons,
Mhm.
kind of where the land stops and the water begins, that's where they call you in, and that's where you kind of pick up the process of
Yeah,
looking for whatever it is that potentially happened. Is that right?
yeah, for sure. It's typically, most cases are witness drownings. You know, they're in a swim area and on a tube, and unfortunately, they can't swim, and down they go. And so there's usually a witness statement that goes with it and all that stuff. Other times there's suspicious activities, like they think somebody might be in this pond, and they just want us to go and check the pond or clear it. They might be looking for somebody, they don't know where they are, and they just want us to go clear the area. So we do a lot of that as well.
Luke, what do you feel the breakdown is? Like, and I'm sure that that varies from, month to month, year to year. What percentage of it is usually more environmental, like you said, like retrieving a vehicle, again, whether it be environmental concerns or insurance, and then what percentage of it is we're we're suspecting that there's a drowning, and could you guys please get involved? And there will be a possible body recovery.
It's probably 80% body recovery, 10% vehicle, and 10% evidence. It's pretty hard to put a vehicle in the water in the middle of summer out here. It's usually like we get a vehicle or two in the winter when they bust through the ice. Again, with this year being so mild, it's happened a couple times already. Yeah, typically it's about 80% body recoveries.
Wow. And so what does that typical dive look like?
Black. It's very dark. So it's, again, like we have such a diverse environment up here in Alberta. We have the plains, we have the Rocky Mountains, we have the forests up north. So every dive is very different. Sometimes we're in glacier fresh water, sometimes we're in basically sewage reserves.
Mm.
Um, it's not a pretty sight at all. And like I said, it's there is no visibility. If you have an inch of visibility, you're probably lucky. So everything is by feel. We have our system set up with special grid patterns directing our divers from the top side. We have special patterns we set up underwater to like line searches so that we can systematically check off areas. It's a very slow process. So if there's a drowning victim, to search an area 100 meters by 100 meters or 100 yards by 100 yards could take 8, 10, 12 hours sometimes.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the questions that my husband, when I was talking with him about it, excuse me. So my husband and I fish a little bit. My husband fishes, and he has an uncle who has a boat, and they go out onto the lake. And his uncle has this kind of sonar system,
Mm-hmm.
right? When they're looking for schools of fish.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that my husband was asking is, do you guys have similar equipment? Kind of a sonar, and obviously I am grasping at words because I
Yeah.
am very ignorant. But do you have equipment that is like, ooh, we're seeing a difference in the depths right here, and it's showing us that there might be something down there that is not typical for this area.
For sure. So the last thing we want to do is put a diver in the water. Like, even though we call ourselves divers, because it's so dangerous, we don't want to be putting ourselves at risk. So what we'll do is, if we get called out to call, the first thing we want to do is we want to deploy our technology. So what we have is called a side scan sonar and an ROV, a remote underwater operated vehicle. It's like a drone that goes underwater.
Yeah.
But what we'll do is we'll start out first with our side scan sonar, and this isn't a typical fish finder type thing. They all claim that they have side scan sonars, but they're very, very limited. What we have is we have 100 feet of cable it's called a tow fish. It looks like a torpedo that we drop down below, and we want to keep it about 6 feet off the floor of the lake or the river. And then it shoots out a beam, goes down, and it shoots out a beam horizontally. And what we're looking for is like shadows. So imagine taking a Barbie doll and having a flashlight along the side of it. So you're looking for shadows is what you're looking for that kind of
Yeah.
mimics an object that you're looking for. And so we can scan about 150 feet on each side, to the right and to the left of the boat, as we're dragging this thing along. So we can cover off a ton of area. And then we can take that data, we record all the data, we can put it in a computer, and then we can start zooming in on objects. We can start measuring the size of objects. Because what happens is we have a lot of deadfall in the lakes and objects in the lakes. So sometimes a body will look like a log, or a log will look like a body. And so you need to really start measuring objects, because if you start measuring objects and this looks like a body, but it's measuring 12 feet long, well, it's not a body. So you don't need to dive down and check that out. So we start crossing off a lot of potential targets, and then we'll come up with systematically with, okay, what's the witness statement say? What does measure properly? What really shows a good shadow? And then we'll start hitting those targets.
Okay. Now, this may sound like a silly goose kind of question, but you mentioned that it's dangerous and it's hazardous. How, I mean, obviously, other than the obvious of being underwater, right, and relying a lot on gear and feel because you cannot see, what else kind of makes it such a dangerous occupational piece for you?
So we work and we train in what's called IDLH environments, immediately dangerous to health and life environments. So it's when you're underwater, you don't have a second chance. Like, you just can't take a breath of air and hold your breath and pop back up. So you're in extremely dangerous environments. You can't come up too fast. So if you're at a deep depth, and you need to make an emergency ascent, there's dangers that could happen to you as well. The bends, like lots of other things. Then you're also in there into the unknown. You can't see, you can't hear. All your senses are stripped away from you except for feel. So you have no idea what you're doing or anything like that. So we rely heavily on the top side or the sonars to tell us what's going on down there. And then there's equipment failures that could happen, all that stuff. So we always have to be concentrating on our divers when they're in the water, always checking in, all that stuff. And even things like, we count the bubbles as they're underneath. You know, how many bubbles is it per minute that they're blowing up, right? They're blowing about 8 bubbles per minute. They're pretty relaxed, getting to the 12 bubbles per minute. Oh, they're starting to stress out or something like that. So we're always paying attention to them.
Yeah. Well, and you were saying you're relying, excuse me, heavily on feel, but I imagine that's even diminished because you've got to be wearing some sort of equipment on your hands, right? Like you're not barehanded when you're in these waters,
Yeah,
right?
and because it's like, so typically our waters, especially in the winter and fall and spring, it's about 4 degrees. And
Yeah.
so it's cold. So you're wearing like insulated gloves, and then because of the contamination, you're wearing rubber gloves on top of that again. And so yes, you feel a stick. You might feel like a femur. You're trying to break the stick underwater to see if it's going to break, and then you kind of, okay, well, there's something there. So it's all, again, the feeling is the only sense that you get.
Okay. And it's like, I'm glad you said that. I'm also glad that it's like, oh, am I glad that I heard that you say, is that a femur? Let me see if I can break this, right? But that really kind of that next question in my mind was like, okay, so you're down there and you can't see anything and you can't hear anything and you're feeling around. Do you kind of get that spidey sense when you touch something, like you personally, Luke? Have you had that experience where you're like, I'm pretty sure that what I'm feeling and what I'm about to retrieve is what I think it is?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
you know you're down there for a purpose and a reason, and you mentally prepare yourself for that. But when you are blacked out, it's still like, it doesn't matter how many times you've done it, it's still a shock factor.
Mm.
Sometimes you miss it with your hands and you bounce off the object with your face or something like that, and it's just, and not to sound gory or anything like that, but it's, again, you can't see anything, and you don't, like, lights don't work down there because of the algae and the turbidities and all that stuff. So it's always a shock factor every single time.
We touched base a little bit about this, Luke, when when I reached out to you and asked you to join us here, and I told you that I was a therapist, and I am primarily an addiction and a trauma therapist, and my trauma therapist brain keeps saying, like, your nervous system is like a slinky. Like, your nervous system is just like constantly saturated with like survival mode. You're in survival mode when you're down there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know about like releasing stress hormones and all of this stuff. I mean, you're down looking for one of the three things, whether it's evidence, a vehicle, or a person. And you said that sometimes it can be 8 to 12 hours, right?
Mhm.
That you guys are searching down there, and that is 8 to 10 hours of being in a survival mode from a nervous system standpoint. And how do you cope with that? How do you decompress from that? How do you get your nervous system like get back to this kind of like normal space of managing your your nervous system? I mean, I don't know how else to ask that question.
It's
Look, are you okay? Are you doing okay? We just need to know. Are you blink twice
yes,
if you're
I'm
okay?
okay. It's not coffee. It is we have lost a few divers. Again, trying to find people that can do it is very different from people that want to do it. So we get a lot of applications for people that want to do it. And then unfortunately when they do find their first body, that's it. It's done. Like some people don't have that mechanism to be able to cope with it, and that is totally fair.
Mhm.
We will talk to them. We will try to support them any which way we can. Myself and a couple other team members, we are emergency service personnel. Like I said, I've got 20 years of volunteer firefighting. My sister owns funeral homes. I do medical examiner transports for them. My dad is a police officer. So that side is very, our dinner conversations are very interesting sometimes.
Yeah,
And
I can
so
imagine.
to be able to talk to the family is a good thing. Being able to talk to each other is a good thing. And making sure that people don't think that they're macho or anything like that. Like, just come talk to us. We're here for each other. It's not, a body underwater is very different from a body on ground.
Mhm.
When you see a body on ground or you go to an accident or something like that, you see what you're approaching. Even the compositions are very different. Underwater, you don't see what you're coming up to, depending on how long they've been underwater. It's always very, very different.
So, Luke, as far as the retrieval process, and I'm really trying to not allow my brain to get super gory, but
Yeah.
hopefully that this is normal for people to have these just kind of like, oh my goodness, what is this? When bodies have been underwater and we're working with a decomposing, right? A
Could
decomposing
be, yeah.
body.
Yeah.
When you are retrieving a body, if it was in one piece, does it usually come out in one piece? Does it?
Chelsea's laughing, just so you know, because our primary defense mechanism is humor. And when we get like overwhelmed, like my nervous system is saturated just from thinking, like hearing you talk about going down blind. I can feel a knot in my stomach. Like I'm a visual person. I can feel even just the story you're telling. So I can't even imagine what you're in. And I see Chelsea just being like, ah, wow, I don't know.
So we've developed our own program, and I don't know if this is common throughout other dive teams or not. The New Jersey boys taught us this, and it's a very professional way to handle the deceased. Not just handling the deceased, but it's also for respect to the family. So what we'll do is when we do find them, we actually mark them. And so what we'll do is we'll send up it's called an SMB, it's a submersible buoy. So we'll send it up, we'll tie it to them, we'll send it up, and then we know where the body is always now. So then we'll come back and then reassess. Then we'll head back out with an underwater body bag, and we'll actually bag the body underwater and collect as much evidence or anything like that. We'll take up a little bit of silt off the bottom, any particulates, and maybe there's a bullet down there. If we try to gather as much stuff as we can under there. And then that way is not only preserving the evidence, but when you do bring the deceased back up to shore or to the boat, and there's always family there watching, it's respect for them that they're not, everything's already done, packaged, and all that stuff.
And I'm so, so glad that you saved my comment or my question, because I think that's what I was trying to say. Like, how would you do? Because again, my mind is just going all over the place
Yeah.
on. It's amazing to know. And that obviously, now that you say it, makes so much sense. But like, I had no idea that there was an underwater body bag, right?
Yeah.
And that would be a different material, a different setup than what you would think of a body bag on land, correct?
For sure. So the underwater body bags, they zip open differently. They almost like a sleeping bag. They're big. They're fluorescent yellow with special zippers on it, so with floats on it that glow in the dark, so you can kind of see, feel them or whatever. But then they're made of a mesh too. So when you do bring them up, you don't have a body bag full of water, because if you're 200 pounds and now you're bringing up 300 pounds of water, those body bags are just going to split apart. So these ones actually drain as you bring them out, but collecting all the evidence.
I'm sorry, I'm just like, I don't think I've ever had to process this much in an interview. I'm like fascinated.
Well, I think it's one of those things, and I don't want I don't want you to think that we're like so hyper focused on this kind of gory part of body recovery, but I think it's such a new
Concept.
concept for
Yeah.
people like at least Chelsea and me, that now that it's like this new kind of room in this house that we didn't know was there, and it's like you're so curious because you don't even know how to begin to imagine or fathom what the process is. And
Mhm.
so then it's like, oh, okay, so you're a diver, cool, you go into water, wow, cool, you know. And then you're like, but it's pitch black, and then you're like, oh, well, that's not cool. And then we're like, oh, but you're going there to retrieve things, so how do you do that when you don't see it? And then you're like, you just feel for it. And then we're like, oh shit, this is wild. And then it's like, oh, then you find something, and then we're like, yeah, but then what? Like, I I just I'm having a hard time, right, processing this too, because
Right. I
it's
mean,
just
I've studied in cadaver labs. Like I know that we had a rotation, like Lucas and I, my husband and I both had rotations in cadaver labs. And like I said, I feel like I've been exposed to those things, and my brain can process, this is what a body looks like, and even like a cross section, right?
Yeah.
Of We're exposing different organs that the learning cadavers or studying cadavers, we were able to explore and study. But again, yet like I said, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around, like, man, because I hear, you hear of like how badly bloated, that word,
Mhm.
that bodies become very bloated in the water. And like I said, I've just not been exposed. I don't think a lot of us have been exposed unless you've worked in that. Um, and I guess kind of with that thought, does that distort when you're starting to feel around? Do you have to kind of mentally prepare for what a bloated body would feel like, as opposed to, what you would normally think of what a hand or an arm or something would feel like in a normal state?
Yeah.
Would you have to kind of, kind of prepare yourself for, I'm going to be looking for a bloated body?
Unfortunately, there is no preparation for that. We've pulled bodies out of the water that have been in the water for 2 weeks and they're still in rigor mortis, which is that would never happen on land, right? Because of the depths and temperatures of the water, the decomposition stage is slowed down so much that it doesn't affect. But so you're always shocked. You don't know what you're running into. There's different bagging processes for people in the rigger. There's different bagging processes for floaters and people that are bloated and all that stuff. We've recovered somebody that was in the water for 2.5 years, We did a search for 2.5 years and found them, and they were still intact per se, but it was very delicate.
Now, Luke, I imagine that there's two sides to this coin when you make a quote unquote successful recovery. There's kind of a sigh of relief that you found this person,
Mhm.
right, who has family and friends and who we collectively care about as humans. And you're like, okay, good, we found this person. But then it's crap, this sucks, right? And it's hard. And are you usually the one who has to have those conversations with the loved ones of the individuals that you recover?
No, so we don't have the conversations again. So because we're deployed by law enforcement, it is technically their scene. So they are the lead investigators. So we're just there for assistance to the law enforcement. So we do our job is like when they bring out ground search and rescue or something like that. Everyone's working under that investigator or the person that has that file. So we do our job and then we report back to that case manager or whatever, and then typically they will go talk to the family. It's very rare that we do. The hardest part is um, the family always has hope, and they should, because if it's an eyewitness drowning and all that stuff, they think they're in the trees up on the shore or something like that, and they don't understand how slow the process is of recovery diving. So they want to see more happening. And so when you have to talk to them, I've talked to them, it's hard to explain to them these are the steps that need to be taken in order for us to be able to do our job successfully. And we have an 86% recovery rate, which is fantastic. But having those conversations with them is the hardest one. Like, you know what, they're probably in the water, they're not on the shore or in the trees for the last 3 days. So, you know, please be patient. Let us do our job, and let's see if we can bring him home or her home. Or
Hmm.
that's our goal.
I'm so glad you said that, Luke. Bailey and I, that's a lot of, and you're going to hear us, our listeners are going to hear us say a bunch that's really what a big part of what we're wanting to do with this podcast is educate, right? And just kind of you're less ignorant when you leave. And we were talking about this when we did an interview on the police system, Bailey, with the Bayou Strangler, and David was telling us that he was like, I just didn't know that process, right? I didn't realize that this is how long it took. I didn't realize that these kits were on back order. So I say that to say I feel like so often us who are on the watching, the viewing end of things, it's like, what are you doing? Why didn't you just dive down there? Why didn't you just email somebody? Why
Yeah,
didn't you? I think it's really natural for us to think like that should be so much easier or that should be so much faster. So I really appreciate you talking about, again, just bringing awareness to this is a grueling process. And it is something that I'm sure even if you could speed it up, you would not want to, again,
no,
because of safety and also respect, making sure that the crime scene
yeah.
is treated with respect and to make sure that it's thorough and that you are able to save as much evidence as possible.
You would actually be amazed at how many times I get emails throughout the year, or phone calls globally, especially from the states, of saying, you know what, my boy jumped off a bridge, and you know what, the law enforcement's not doing anything. They have cameras in the water, but we need divers here now. And I try not, like, we can't leave the province of Alberta, especially being volunteers, but I always respond to them saying, like, unfortunately, that's the process. Like, you just have faith and let them do their job. Like, it's everyone thinks that jumping in the water is going to be the finding thing. That's the worst thing you can do. Take the time, take the steps, take the technology, stop, reassess, measure, and then when you have those targets, then go check it out. But just to jump in the water is the biggest waste of time you can spend.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, this whole thing is interesting, and I am so appreciative for the work that you and your team do. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be in a vacuum, essentially, right? A sensory vacuum. And, and you're volunteering to do this. And then when you guys play such an important role and you're down there and you make the recovery, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's, evidence, whether it's body, and then you get out and you pack your stuff up and you drive home, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like, and not that it's about that, and I know that, but I feel like you guys don't even get like proper recognition for what you do.
It's not about the recognition at all, but
And we know it isn't, but that's Bailey. When Bailey stumbled upon you, like Luke, I'm going to say you, and I know that you're part of
yeah,
a team. I know that
yeah.
you're not, I know that you would say it's not all me, it's my team. But when Bailey stumbled upon this, she reached out to me and she was, I would say, flabbergasted almost, where she is like, I've spent over a decade, in therapy, in trauma, in true crime as a hobby, right? Like Bailey has always been very interested in this. And she was like, how do we not know about this stuff?
Mhm.
Why is this not something that is like, oh, maybe we could get a dive team out here, And so for what it's worth, and again, we both know that you are by no means wanting any, pats on the back, but thank you so much. And I know that I'm always way too early on. It sounds like I'm trying to conclude an interview,
No,
but
no, for sure.
this moment where I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you so much, and we love you so much. But seriously, thank you for enlightening us on this aspect of what is essential. I mean, this is essential crime work. This is not like, oh yeah, we do it and it's kind of a luxury for this area. Like, no, this is essential work that all areas of crime, all areas of law enforcement should be able to utilize.
For sure, and thank you for that. But it's like if I could say one thing too, and you say it's kind of essential and all that stuff, and it's I need to say to like if people listen to this podcast and all that stuff, like, oh, I'm a diver and all that stuff. Please don't go and try to do this on your own. If you get a phone call, don't go and do it on it. It's not only dangerous, and I should have brought this up earlier when I mentioned the dangerous side too, is it's the after fact of it all too. So when you recover a body, you're bringing up who knows, like you might be bringing a body that's full of AIDS or hep c's or anything like that. So you have to think about the post dive too, the decontamination side of it all too. That's more important than the dive itself. So when you bring a body up from water, they're expelling everything, all their fluids, all that stuff, and you're getting covered in it. There's no way around it. And so you need to do a proper decontamination thing after, and then a finite cleaning thing. It's not a so please, if you are listening to this and you're a diver, please just don't go do it.
Will you walk us through that, Luke, on the decontaminating process once you've come, I guess what, above, once you've come up, once you're what word am I
Once
looking?
you've ascended,
Once you've ascended, there you go. I'm trying to say
once you pop out of the water like a
I'm
beautiful
trying to say stage
mermaid.
ride, and I'm like, that's not a word. I think I'm just so overwhelmed. Ah.
So we actually started a decontamination process before the dive. So we have special gear is vulcanized. Like we are totally encapsulated. You can't have any skin touching water. We are in special dry. So these are more certificates. You have to have your special dry suit certificate, your full face certificate, decontamination certificate. You can't be exposed to any of the environment underwater. And so we'll start the decontamination process prior to getting in the water by soaking ourselves down in a solution so that when we get in the water, our gear is actually off gassing this solution to try to keep contaminants off of us. Theoretically, it sounds great, but when you start bringing up victims and they're expelling and vomit and bloods and you never know what somebody has, and that stuff is just lingering around on you. So then you bring the victim up, and then after, when you can't even undress. Like lots of people want to come out of the water, pull their full face mask off, and say, "I got them." Worst thing you could possibly do. Now all that contaminant is going into your lungs. You don't know what you're going to get, so you have to stay fully dressed And you're talking 80, 100 pounds of gear that you're wearing after you've already strained yourself on a recovery. Now you're trying to get back up to shore to the decontamination site. So it's extremely exhausting. And then you have to do a thorough washdown in a systematic way from top down, pulling gear off in a special way. And then once that's all washed off, then you wash it off again. And then when you get home, you break every piece down, all your regulators, everything like that. You open them all up and you wash them thoroughly again. Even the guy that's decontaminating you, scrubbing you down, should be in a Tyvek suit, gloves, and a mask. You never want to take that stuff home.
In the allied health, or I guess any health profession, we're taught this idea of universal care type of thing, right? Like you are going to view every single patient like they could be just, patient zero.
Yep.
They could be the most infected, So thank you for that reminder, because again, I imagine that is something that would be very tempting to, like you said, you pop up and you do all of that. Now, I'm sure that these things that you're talking about is stuff that not only they talk about during certification, but do you guys try to get together, and I say guys, I don't know, male, female, but do
Yeah.
you people try to get together once a quarter and just like, hey, let's refresh, let's make sure? Do you do that kind of before every dive? How do you guys keep up your continuing education, if you will?
It's really difficult for us. We try to as best as we can, especially, again, we only have about the 6, 7 core people that do attend. But when you're talking about people, our members live across the province. So when you're talking that people live 7 hours away from us, another member, for him to take that time off work to drive to a training scenario for a day or two, losing time, losing his time with his family, it makes it very difficult. So this is where the funding would be fantastic, so we can reimburse members to make training more proficient and more regular. We do everything we possibly can. We have our standards. Obviously, standards can always be upped and should be upped, but this is what we have to work with right now, and it has worked for us. But we'd like to keep upping it.
And while we're on that kind of note, and I just wanted to circle back to maybe start putting some bows on this stuff. Let's say somebody has an open water dive certificate, right? They've got the kind of the bare bones, if you will. Roughly how long is the process to become a certified underwater criminal investigator?
It's all up to the individual, really, and how much they want to spend. You can hammer through the courses in a matter of a year, or you can do it over 4 years or whatever. There's a bunch of steps that need to happen, and you have to take them in the appropriate steps. Your open water, your advanced open water, your dry suit, your full face mask, your rescue diver, your public safety diver. And again, up in Canada, we're very limited to what training we can. That's why we had to bring up the Jersey boys, who are fantastic. They're wonderful.
How did you guys find the Jersey Boys? You keep talking about the Jersey Boys or the Jersey team. Was that serendipitous? Did you guys have, reach out on Facebook or whatever? How does that work?
So we reached out 5 years ago. So our law enforcement up here, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they're our federal police, and they are the police for 80% of our country. Their dive teams have a standard called ERDI, Emergency Response Diving International, and we can't get that up in Canada. So we wanted to match their credentials so that we can say, we're trained as well as you guys. We meet your standards. And so in order to find that, only one person in Canada instructs it, and he is an RCMP officer that instructs the RCMP dive teams. But because there's a conflict of interest, he couldn't teach us. So we got on Google and started Googling ERDI teams in the States, because it's very common down there. You guys have so many dive teams down there. It's bizarre. But we found East Public Safety Diving out in New Jersey, and they have been fantastic. We talk to them all the time. I've helped instruct courses with them. I was actually just on a course with them last week. They're asking me to come down to Boston or New Jersey in April. and they're the gold standard of diving.
Well, I think that's great. I think that you have at least the Jersey team as a resource, if you will, somebody that you can share this process with, because
Yeah,
you're kind of in a very small niche in what you do, right?
yeah, very small.
So I guess my kind of I have so many questions, okay, but for the sake of respecting your time, I mean, I literally could talk about this for like 12 hours straight. Okay, I just want you to know, Luke, that this has unlocked a new part of my like fascination about what you
Yeah.
do. Probably because I don't think that I could ever do that kind of stuff. But why do you do it? Why do you it's expensive, it's dangerous, it's a lot and so many different meanings of the word. So why do you do it?
Me personally, I do it because I have the equipment, I have the knowledge, I have the capabilities mentally to be able to do it. Um, and then also, it's we don't offer this service. Alberta doesn't offer this service, so somebody needs to do it. And if I have that capability, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm a big firm believer in volunteering. Without volunteers in this world, it would be a very shitty world, really.
Yeah.
Um, Even down to public libraries and all that stuff. But it's my way of giving back to not only my immediate community, but the provincial community and all that stuff. It's very important.
Yeah. And I think that being able to bring closure to the families, right? To the victims' families is a big part of that too.
Most important, could you imagine having a loved one down there with no resources to bring them home?
No.
Everyone deserves to have start that grieving process eventually. I wish sometimes it was faster, but unfortunately, sometimes it's the process. And
Yeah. Well, and again, one of the reasons why I was so grateful that you agreed to join us here on the show, but I think that's another angle of the true crime genre in the community, and why Chelsea and I are doing this interview style podcast is bringing in the people like you who are so important for the recovery and healing side of this genre that people just are so infatuated with, right? So I think it's one thing to, tune into your favorite true crime podcast and you hear this really gory story and you're just like, "Oh shit, wow. That's crazy." And then you get to click stop and then you get to totally shift gears and you get to go to work and you get to just be like, "Wow, I can't believe that, this person is missing. That sucks for the families. Like they never found them." And then now we have people like you and your team and the Jersey Boys who come in who are kind of playing out the other side of that episode. And I'm not saying it has to be criminal in nature, but I'm saying like, someone's driving down the road and they get a flat tire, they drive off and they go into the water and they can't escape. And now you guys are called in.
mm,
And I just am so grateful to know about the services now in this kind of community that you're a part of, because fortunately, like I told you, several weeks ago when we spoke, fortunately I've never had to think about you or what you do, right?
mm,
In my life, I'm very fortunate for that.
for sure.
And I want everybody to know who you are and I want everybody to know what you guys do, because I'm so impressed by the work that you do and I'm so grateful. And listen, I'm a fangirl, but my husband's a fanboy, right? He's even more of a fan. And I think my brother-in-law Lucas is a total fanboy. Like you have so many people here just rooting for you and want to support you in any way that we can. Kind of a long-winded piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Luke, my last thing, and Bailey and I were talking about it a couple of days ago when we were thinking about this process of interviewing people, and I kind of want this to be a trending thing, but I kind of wanted to ask you, what is there a question? Because we try really hard to come up with questions that are worth your time and worth your energy. Do you have one that you're like, you know what I really wish people would ask me? You know what I really wish people would know? And if you don't have one, then that's fine. But we just, like I said, we are ignorant. This is new for us.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that you are like, I just really, really wish people knew this or people would ask this, what would that be?
You know, in all honesty, Bailey, I sent you the questions that were commonly asked, and I don't really have a question per se, is because again, we're not out there for recognition or appreciation or anything like that. We kind of like to work in the darkness, figuratively speaking and literally speaking, I guess. But we're not here. We're just here to do what we can do to help. And people are more than welcome to email me if they have specific questions or anything like that. There's lots of stuff I cannot talk about for sure. But no, like absolutely drop me a line or whatever. On the safety side, if people wear life jackets, we wouldn't need to be here. It's an unfortunate thing, but unfortunately we are here.
Our mom was always that sunscreen life jacket, and I so remember, Bailey and I, we had an aunt that had a lake house and those things growing up, and I remember we were always, in my recollection, we were always, in a life jacket, but I do remember it was always begrudgingly, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
thankfully, we did have a mom who was like, make sure you wear your life jacket, make sure you
Mm-hmm.
put your sunscreen on.
And all the adults were just like, you're not getting on the water without a life jacket.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
but all
Yeah.
the adults weren't wearing a life jacket or wearing sunscreen, were they?
I think ours were, though, actually.
Oh,
Like
really?
Uncle Frank and like our
Good for
family
them.
was really big because our grandmother's
Brother.
brother, our great Uncle Sam, passed away in the Chelsea, the 50s?
So, yeah,
There were two girls who were drowning and he jumped in to save them and he drowned.
yeah,
And
Very common story.
yeah. He
yeah.
was able to rescue both of the girls. He was able to swim them to shore. And the family story is they speculated that he might have cramped up or just been so exhausted after rescuing both of the girls that he then drowned. And yeah, he was 18, so that was back in
Yeah.
the mid 50s. So our family, because of that incident, they've always been just very,
Cautious.
I guess, wanting to respect. Yeah, and wanting to respect the water.
It's very common to recover the rescuer,
Mhm.
and a drowning happens within seconds. As people think that you're struggling out there, you don't know that they're drowning, but it's within like a person can typically drown in 10 to 20 seconds
Wow.
or faster.
That's just,
Yeah.
it's horrifying. So, well, again, thank you for your humility, number one. It's always amazing to hear people who we are just like, you're amazing. And you guys are like, meh, it's just another day. We don't do it for any glory. Like that just is, Bailey and I have talked about how we never imagined that we would meet so many people in this journey of podcasting that have kind of restored our faith in
Oh
humanity.
my gosh. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, I'm kind of at a loss of words. And it's so weird because, I do therapy for a living. And so I sit in emotions all day, every day. And I have for years and years, heavy emotions. But this interview stuff, like speaking with you, Luke, is just, it brings out a different kind of connection with my emotions that I'm not used to. And it's so wild, but it's so cool. And again, it's just because I think the word that we use is just like we're so in awe of the amazing thing that humans do and know and how they're impacting the world around them. And we really just want to kind of like double down on that ripple effect, right? And have wonderful human beings like yourself, hear your voice for our listeners, the handful, the couple hundred, the couple of thousands, just so they are aware and they know who you are and that you exist. And it's just super cool. And we're really grateful for who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Well,
I appreciate
and
that.
Yeah.
like Bailey said, we we're gonna obviously list anything that we can, all of your links, all of your information in our show notes. So, and another thing that Bailey and I have kind of I don't think we intended to start doing this, but we've really kind of started saying, so you listener, if you are like, hey, you know what? My New Year's resolution is to look into a program that I could maybe support. Or, hey, I want to write to my local, government, my local law enforcement to get a ball rolling. I would highly, highly recommend, Luke, you and your staff and your organization. And I know I keep saying you, and I'm sure, and I know that you're probably like, it's not just me. I know I've said that a bunch, but for lack of not knowing the rest of your team, I just, again, thank you for all of that information. Thank you for the safety information regarding just as simple as life jackets. And you listener, I hope that you want to take on maybe donating or writing to some governments to get some changes going.
Some of you guys have cousins whose aunt's cousin is in legislation in Alberta, and y'all need to send this podcast to them and be like, hey, like, y'all, Alberta, listen, guys, you're not looking good. You're not looking good because you're the only province that doesn't support Luke and his team and what they do. And you need to get it together, man.
Yeah.
So,
but in the meantime, check out our website. You know what? If you can't make a donation, you can even buy our clothing. We have an online clothing store attached to the website, and it's a really cool clothing.
Done.
Ooh, I'm gonna get Zach a shirt.
I was gonna say, done. Man, that is an easy yes for me. Easy yes.
Yeah, and we'll just make sure to list everything in our show notes, and we'll kind of tie it up there. Is there anything else that you need from us, Luke?
No, I really do appreciate the opportunity, guys. This is definitely something that has been out of my realm. Definitely not a public speaker or anything like that. Don't do interviews very often.
You did fantastic.
And so I appreciate this. Thank you.
And best of luck with your training that you're going to be doing down in the New Jersey area in April. And hopefully we can kind of keep up. Hopefully you'll kind of post a little bit on how it's going and just the advancements within your group. And like I said, maybe we'll get an update that you guys have gotten some funding. That would be amazing.
You will keep everyone updated on our Facebook post for sure.
Awesome.
Well, we appreciate it, and thank you so much, Luke.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Wildside Tribe, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Wildside Podcast.
Make sure to tune in on Wildside Wednesdays. New episodes will drop each Wednesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
We would love to hear from you, so if you have a wild case recommendation, email us at wildsidepodcast@gmail.com. That's wildside with a C. Or share your thoughts in the comments below.
As always, if you haven't heard it today, you're loved, you're worthy, and you're valuable. And we'll catch you on the flip side.